All right, welcome, Kevin. Uh, this is Phil Salter with No Better Time, and I'm here with Kevin Anderson, my good friend, and I guess fellow entrepreneur. You may be wondering if you're watching this what I am doing in a tub. I'm actually at my parents' house because my dad had sod delivered today, and I took some time off to go help install it in his new house. And of course, they only delivered half the sod, and he had all these people here to help, and they're like, "Oh, oops, sorry." And it's like, okay, people took time off. Like, I'm like, you need to get them to give you a refund or a discount or something. But anyways, so I'm here in the tub because of the lighting seemed pretty decent, and also seems pretty funny. But I'm here with Kevin, like I said. How you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
No, thanks for coming on. Kevin is someone that actually lives near me, and we became friends. Like it's been a few years now, right? At least 3 years or more, right?
Not long after you moved in.
Yeah. It all started
Or
with
bit. 3 years,
a
4 years.
mutual, yeah, something like that. I've been living here about 4.5 years, so maybe I think I'd been here about a year though before we really became friends. Like we knew each other and we'd seen each other at church and things like that. But we have a mutual friend, Todd Bowerly, who I'm trying to get on this podcast as well because he's like a career and life coach. But he's very busy, very successful, busy guy.
Yeah,
But I started doing movie nights with him, and then you started joining us. Do
yeah.
you remember that? It's been a
That was.
while.
It's been a while. COVID kind of messes with that kind of stuff, right? So,
Yes, yes.
but
And then once you get out of the habit of doing things with your friends, it's easy to like stay in the habit of not doing things, unfortunately.
unfortunately, yeah,
But but I guess the thing about you that I've always been really impressed about is like how you're always looking for opportunities to learn new things, try new concepts for side gigs, side hustles, but also really doing awesome things with your like career as well on top of that. And I just want to kind of talk about if you tell your story of kind of when you've known when to pivot, when you've how you recognize opportunities, and how people can kind of learn from that and to recognize opportunities and also know when maybe to pivot and change what you're going for as well.
yeah. It's always been interesting because growing up, it was just kind of something that I did. My brothers always would say that I could probably sell ice to an Eskimo or bad breath to a dog or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Um, it was just something like for me. I'm a little different than all of the rest of my brothers. My brothers are very, academic type people. I wasn't as much. I mean, I enjoyed school and things like that, but really, when it came down to it, people were the things that I loved, and so I don't know. I started there as a pretty young kid. In fact, when I got home from my LDS church mission, I started my own landscape business, for instance. I was kind of waiting to go to school and whether or not I was going to get accepted and things like that. And so just starting a business just to kind of keep me busy. And that was kind of really the start of the entrepreneurial mindset for me. I really enjoyed it. In fact, I wish that was one regret that I probably had is that I didn't push a little harder to continue to do that business. Um, but you know how parents are sometimes, and don't get me wrong, I love my parents and I love the guidance that they give. But in this particular case, like it could have opened up a lot, but they really wanted me to go back to school,
Hmm.
and I did too. And I thought at the time school was probably the right thing for me. But I found out after I left that that there was a potential job that was like a $7,000 a month contract. That I could have probably captured and done. And so going into school, though, I mean, even there, I went through the whole first year of school. Uh, Went and knocked doors during the summer selling pest control. Right there at the end of this first school year, there though, I torn up my knee pretty bad and had to have surgery at playing basketball. And so when I came back to school, I was really hoping to go and kind of further maybe try out for some double A school or something, some community college basketball team or something like that. And so I was making tape and everything like that, and the year before, and got to the point where um, I was taking a beginning basketball class to kind of get my feet back, and went up for a rebound, took my legs out again, I took my knee out again.
Hmm. Just like when you landed.
No, just when I went up,
Oh, like when.
we were just doing a simple 3-man weave drill, and I retore my knee, and so
Mm,
and that pretty much ended any dreams of playing basketball in college. I had no aspirations to play in the NBA or anything, but it would have been fun to play a community level program. So,
yeah.
so what was really interesting though at the school at the time, there was no jobs. It's a really small town, right? Rick's College or BYU Idaho is what it was, and we're up in Rexburg, Idaho, and there's all these students, and all the jobs get taken really quick, and so I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay there. I was dropping out of school though, because I couldn't get up and down the hill to get to school. And one day, and I'll credit this guy here. One day, I'm just making homemade bread, right? And this is just the continued journey of this entrepreneurial thoughts, right? So I'm making bread here, and this guy, his name's Gary Cox. He lives in the apartment just right across the way. He comes in to see one of my roommates, and he comes in and he goes, "Oh man, what's that smell?" and and I'm like, "Oh man, it's homemade bread." And so I gave him a slice. It just literally come out of the oven, and we slathered on some butter and cinnamon and sugar, and he's like, "Oh man, I'd pay money for this." So light
Ding
bulb, right?
ding.
Yeah, light bulb.
Yeah.
So that night, I sacrificed the bread that I just had made. I cut all of it up, and I walked around to all the apartments in my apartment complex, and I took orders. And I think I took 80 orders that night of,
Wow.
of homemade bread, and it was fun. It was quite the experience because I was doing this all inside of my apartment, and I had no hand. I did everything by hand. I did not have a mixer, so I did everything by hand, and so um, it ended up being that I just went, usually from about 7 8 o'clock at night until about 6 7 o'clock in the morning in making bread, and then I would
And you
just
said at the time you weren't in school though, right? So you
wasn't
had
that
you had
cool.
and it was hard to find a job because it was like limited opportunities and students would just snatch them up. Okay.
Yeah, because
So
it was about
interesting.
3 weeks into school, right? And so all the
Uh-huh.
jobs were already gone. It
Yeah.
was impossible, you
So
know.
you needed an opportunity, right? So would you say because of a need, you were more likely to notice like the opportunity? Or you think it's hard to say maybe?
It's hard to say in that particular instance,
Yeah,
but
because it's pretty in your face. Like I would pay for this. Oh, wait a minute.
uh, yeah, what was really interesting, and this is something that some people need to realize when they are going down the road of a business, whether it be a side hustle
Hmm.
like making bread or something like that. Um, I saw my orders start to drop. When I started to look at it, I was noticing that it was the girls.
That we're stopping.
They weren't really ordering bread anymore. And so then,
Mm.
of course, for me, I've got to understand why, because they had been ordering like 2 or 3 loaves at a time, and like each girl, like I mean, we were pushing out a lot of bread, and I mean, we probably were cranking out upwards around 120 to 150 loaves a night, and so I walked over and I started asking all the girls why they weren't ordering, and they were like, "Well, Kevin, it's white bread," and I'm like, "Okay, I'm a guy, right?" So I'm like, "And what does that even mean?" You know, and so they're like, "Look, Kevin, it's we just got to be able to have something more like a wheat bread or something like that." And so immediately I just said, "Oh, well, I need to pivot." So
Hmm.
the next thing I did is I I went home and I called my mom. Right? What does anybody do when they're trying to figure something out? They call mom or dad, and so mom says, "Oh yeah, I've got a recipe for that." So then I drive down to Idaho Falls and I pick up all the supplies I need for wheat bread, and then I make a bunch of the wheat bread, bring it over, and give some of the bread away to the girls, and all of a sudden my sales go right back up. Right. Well, so then even then, like I started to pivot again. I said, "Oh, okay, well that's white and wheat. Well, what else could I make?" So then I had
Mm.
cinnamon bread, cinnamon raisin bread, dark rye bread. The Russia experiences for me, and on my church mission, black bread was just that was the stuff, man. It was so good. So then we'll fast forward here, and I kind of got back into it where I just needed to work for somebody, and I felt comfortable, right? And it got to the point where you get that itch again going down the road, but you start second guessing yourself sometimes. Maybe a venture doesn't work out just right, and
Mm-hmm.
that part's that part's kind of frustrating sometimes in the journey. Um, but I moved down to Arizona, was working for University of Phoenix, and I had a buddy of mine that convinced me to do like an MLM company and in the finance industry. And so then I moved up to here to Utah, and of course, starting a finance business is incredibly difficult as it is, and takes time and to start really seeing money. So of course, I'm trying to find a job and delivering newspapers, hating every aspect of this, right? And and that's when I found the company that I started working for. It was a technology company, software company that does document management, and they were a great company. I got in pretty early into the company. They were probably around for a few years beforehand, and started out in tech support and started to climb the ladder. And it was a lot of fun and
Mm-hmm.
great experience. And in fact, now, I mean, I've been in the document management industry now for 16 years now.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's
So you've been in
been,
Utah for 16 years or so?
yeah, it was 2005. So yeah, 16 years now, right?
So if I'm following what you're saying, you're saying you did this kind of bread thing, which obviously had a certain lifespan, and then you moved on and got like kind of your normal job working for someone else,
Yep.
and you felt comfortable on that. You said, and maybe there's a certain, like, maybe even if it's just perceived security around that, right?
Yeah.
And here you are in your story where now you're working for this company for
Yep.
at least a certain period of time. Okay.
Yeah, I was, and I was at this company. The company's name is eFile Cabinet. I was at that company for 8.5 years almost,
Hmm. Okay.
and had gotten to the point where I was in a management position and really loving it. But there was a lot of things that were changing at that company, decisions that being made and things like that I didn't necessarily agree with. Um, and it just happened to be like I got to a point where I was actually starting to look at, okay, well, how do I jump ship from here? I really believe in the product that they had, the
Mm.
document software. I was very, very passionate about it, and but I didn't want to work for them anymore.
But this is their software that they had developed as a company that you really liked. It wasn't just the software they were
Yeah,
using. Okay.
this is a software that they had developed, and I went from support to sales to channel
Mm-hmm.
management, business development, and then client relations, where I was really managing all the training and support teams and stuff like that. Um, and I just looked at it and I said, I really want to continue to do this. I just don't necessarily want to work for these guys anymore. So I started looking at the possibility of starting my own company, a consulting company, and then I just happened to have said something that must have sparked some trigger for them. They had hired some more salespeople, and I thought that we needed to hire more support people. And I had been talking about it amongst my peers of the directors, and apparently, and no one's really truly told me the reason why they let me go. But it was, I heard the rumor was because I disagreed with them, and that the CEO had overheard me talking about how we needed to stop the bleeding of support. Support was losing a lot of ground with support or our customer base because they just couldn't get to them fast enough, and it was just because we were shorthanded.
Hmm.
So
Is
here I
there
am.
anything?
Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
I was gonna say anything you feel like you've learned from that experience that, not saying you did something wrong, but that you would have done differently, or is it
No,
just
not necessarily.
politics?
Not necessarily in that case.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong. I was
Yeah.
talking to directors. It was people on the same level as me, um, and I just thought, hey, why don't we try and convince them to do something a little different? What, instead of hiring more salespeople, let's hire a couple more support people, and maybe that'll help out. And then when we do bring on more salespeople, then we can help just better support our customer base. I,
Maybe what to learn from that is just if you're in a position at a higher level and people want to talk about improving, you
yeah.
can't be too precious about your little ideas and
No.
not be willing to listen to constructive feedback, because that's
Right.
that's a failure. Because even if you were wrong, let's talk about it and tell me why I'm wrong. Don't just let me go. But yeah.
And I would say the one thing I mean I did learn obviously something from that is as I continued to go down in my own experiences now it is to listen because there was a period of time that we would meet as directors and it was great. Like the CEO would listen. Like he really wanted us to talk and share our ideas because we were the boots on the ground, right? We
Hmm.
were the people that were in touch with the customers, and so getting feedback from us was really helpful because we would listen to them and take that to developers and say, hey, these are the features that we need, or we need to beef this up a little bit, and we would bring that. And for a long time, he would listen, but then he got to a certain where he just didn't. He just stopped.
Yeah. Could I share something? A really quick story that just made me think of. This
Yeah,
barely happened. I've mentioned, I have a real estate photography business I do on the side.
yeah.
And I was talking with my workout buddy like this past week. We're driving. We go really early in the morning. It's like 5 a.m. We're driving to the gym. And I'm just talking about like, man, some of the things that's come with the podcast is I need to scale my business so that I'm not doing everything myself. I can maybe get some people helping me edit photos or photographers. And I was like, one of the things that I think the place to start is maybe like outsourcing editing of my photos potentially. I don't know, because it takes so much time. And I was talking about the software I use, which I really like, but it seems like I set things up and it processes the photos, but it takes so long. It's kind of a bottleneck. And he just started asking me questions about like, well, do you do this? And he's like, why is it taking so long? And he's like, that seems weird. And I had this moment of like, I felt defensive. Like, no, man, I have it automated and I know what to me, it's like, I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this for 4 years and like, you know what I mean? But then
Yeah.
I had to like stop that. You have to fight that because you can like get into that mindset of like defensiveness and I know what I'm doing. I've been doing this. But then I like stepped back, and that night I actually had a photo shoot, and I was like, what if I tried a different way of editing the photos? Something that came up during the conversation with him once I kind of like pushed away that defensiveness. I was like, well, I guess I could try this other thing, but I don't think if the photos will look as good. I don't even know that it will save time. I ended up doing this other way of processing the photos that took literally at least twice as fast, and the pictures ended up looking even better because
Man.
I let myself step back and not be so precious about the process that I held so dear. You know what I mean? So, anyways,
Is that Reese that you work out with?
no,
Or
it's a guy
who?
named Max.
Oh,
I don't know if
Max.
you've met Max Jorgensen. He's like a neighbor
I don't think I
that,
have.
yeah, no, but
Yeah, well, that's awesome.
anyways,
Well, and it's great. I mean, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to sink back. And it's really interesting. I just went through this training. It's called BU training, like BE and then YOU. Um,
oh, okay.
and I'll tell you one of the things that there was in there, and I'm not going to share a ton of detail, but there was one thing that was in there that's called feedback. And the guy running the program, he just basically said, "Hey, look, this feedback is just informational, right? You can take it if you want to. You don't have to if you don't. These are
Mm-hmm.
people that hadn't really even known you for very long, right? Maybe a day. And but then he said, now sometimes though, somebody's going to say something and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt down
Mm,
in and
yeah.
and and you have to understand that if that's the situation, there is something there, right? There is something that you need to pay attention to because it hurts for a reason. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's what you're talking about. You kind of got defensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was really just interesting to me. There were these people were saying things to me, and every single part of it was just striking me to the core. And I'm like,
Yes.
how in the heck do these people even know this? Like they've known me for like maybe 10 hours, right?
Wow.
And they're just and it's just sitting there, and it sunk in, and even to the point where these past 3 weeks have been incredible of transitioning and saying like one of the things is uh, the one guy he told me, Kevin, you have a hard time saying no. You want to please everybody,
Mm,
right? And because
mm-hmm.
you can't say no, the problem that you have is that then you either sacrifice a lot of the different things. You don't get things done, and then you fail, and then you think to yourself, I'm a failure because I couldn't get things done right. And
Yes,
so
can relate to that.
isn't that it's crazy, right? But it's kind of like you're a people pleaser. You might be a self sabotager, right? And in fact, I'll just kind of jump into that here. Self sabotaging. It's such a common thing. It-
Mm.
we're we're afraid of failure. We have fear of failure, or maybe even fear of success.
Mm-hmm.
Am I worthy to have this success? And for the last maybe 6 or 7 months or so, that's been how I've been feeling. Is I feel, hey, am I really worthy to be able to do this next thing? I've got this business idea, and I'm really wanting to execute on it. It really leverages a lot of my skill sets that I already have, and it goes along with my passion of document management and helping other businesses be more efficient. But then I'm like, okay, well, okay, there's a lot of stuff that needs to get done, and a lot of times what we do is we sit there and we look at, hey, here's where we start, here's our starting point, here's our ending point, and then there's all these steps in between, right? But it's the first step that we put in place there that always gets us to stop, right?
Hmm.
Stop makes us stop before we even get started.
What do you mean by
And
the first step? You mean like
it could be
tell
like,
me?
I need to do XYZ, right? I need to get my business actually set up with the city and the state or
Mm,
whatever, right? And you're like, I really don't, I really don't know how to do that. So that's going to be my first step. And so I can't do any of these other steps until I get that done, right? And
mm-hmm.
so then we just stop before we even start.
So is
And
your you think the answer is just do the step,
but,
or don't let it
oh,
stop you? Like do other things that you can do in the meantime, or
yeah, you can do other things in the meantime. Like if you really don't understand how you're doing that or something like that, number one, you can find somebody that does and have them help you walk through it. For me, it was a matter of the technology that I wanted to use because I'm going to be doing a lot of video and a lot of
mm,
instructional side of things. It's a course, right, of how to do
uh,
certain things and or to buy the settings that I can put together, and then they can go in and download them and do the work and make them their business more efficient, right? And it's just a matter of what you're letting get in the way. Whether it's getting started with how to set up a business, an actual entity, or the technology is getting in the way. It was really funny. You talked about this the other day with me, right? I told you that I've actually been considering doing a podcast, and you were like, I found that the best thing to do is just get started. Just do it. Just
mm,
start, right?
yeah,
Um, and that's the big thing is you just have to get out of your own way.
yeah.
Um, there's a YouTube guy. His name's Sean Cannell, uh, and he does his channel is Think Media, and his intro is you just gotta what is it? It's you just gotta push record, right? If you're starting a YouTube channel, you just have to push record. He even talks about it like, hey man, your first like 20, maybe 50 videos are gonna suck, but
Yeah.
you just gotta push record and get going, and all that technology will come in when you're ready and you can start implementing certain things and making your audio and your video better, then it comes, right? But don't stop. Just keep going and start.
Mm,
Record, right? If there was any bit of advice that I would give anyone looking to start a business, if you got a business idea, just get started.
mm-hmm.
Because I think that that again, it's the thing that stops people the fastest is the start.
Yes.
It's
It's that blank canvas feeling where it's like, but then once you get that first stroke on there, you start to like, oh, okay, I add upon that, and then when you get to a certain stage, you like feel a confidence and a familiarity with the canvas, and you're
yeah.
like, and even if you don't know yet how it's going to end, you feel like, okay, I feel like I have some momentum here. I can build upon this and make a painting, if you will, So, but getting started.
It's the imposter syndrome too
Oh,
that
yes.
people, right?
Hmm.
Because you might not feel like you're the expert, but obviously if you're thinking that this is an idea that you want to do, you already have some kind of skill set, and there's always people that have less skill set towards that thing that you're trying to do than you,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so that might be your market, right? And that's
Yeah.
something that we look at and consider is that you don't have to be the best person at doing XYZ because there's always somebody that's they're worse than you are, right?
Yeah, and any challenge you can learn and you can figure it out, and that's something I've learned as I've changed career paths, as I've tried to do new things even out on my own. um, Stop being intimidated by the fear of like overwhelm and like, oh, I'm not technical enough. Well, then you can become technical enough. You know what I mean? You can
Yeah, you
do
practice.
anything if you put your mind to it and you put in the time and put in the sweat. But it ends up being not as sweaty as you expect most of the time. You're like, oh, okay, this wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. You know,
Yeah,
that's the beautiful part. Like, yeah, you always hear about people saying like, grind, 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 grind. It's like, yeah, it's true. But like, once you get going, sometimes it's not as much of a grind as you thought it was going to be. Not that it's
yeah,
easy, but you know what I mean? Like it's so things are so doable.
yeah. There's always work to do,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and to make yourself get better at different things. But here's the
Hmm.
best part: you don't even have to be an expert at everything about your business either.
There's
You know,
resources out there.
there's all the resources. Like, yeah, you might have to manage your books for the first little bit, but then you go out and you find a bookkeeper that's going to help you
Hmm.
manage the books, right?
Yeah.
Eventually, you have to bring on somebody that's going to help you support your customer base because you just can't do it all. Otherwise, you're
Hmm.
burning yourself out. And then what?
Yeah.
Uh, but you know, I don't know. It's not all fun and games either. Um, when we first met, the business that I had been doing was actually credit repair, and that that was a really satisfying job for me, a satisfying business, I should say.
Hmm.
Um, I had repaired my own credit and worked really hard at it, and then I just thought to myself, man, there are so many people out in the world today that they could use this, and that imposter syndrome and the delay start, that it took me about 2 years to actually start that business. Um, and when I did, it was very gratifying. But there were some things that went on too, like things that in the day job that started to get in the way of my scanning or my credit repair business, because of the fact that I was doing some projects that I had to work on at night where I couldn't work
Hmm.
on during the day during the actual job, so that I mean I had other responsibilities I had to do, and so I was making all these training videos and ended up spending most of the nights doing that, and it just took forever, and eventually the business just kind of shriveled up. All the clients that I had, just we finished everything up and then we were just done. And the problem that I had is I wasn't continuing doing any kind of marketing to bring on new customers.
Hmm.
uh, I had one particular refer. He was in the mortgage industry, and he was actually in Florida, and he would send me leads constantly, and he was really great. And it just, all of a sudden, he even dropped off, and I found out later he'd gotten cancer,
Hmm.
and you know, and so he just wasn't in the business as much anymore because he was trying to get himself healthy again. And so, but there was a point of time where I didn't know when to quit. There was all these expenses coming in that I was constantly dealing with, and um, at some point you have to look at it and say, "Man, is this the time to pull the plug? Is are we flatlined here,
Yeah.
or do we keep going?" And it took a lot of effort to do marketing and get clients for me. It was pretty tough at the time for me to do, and trying to talk to people when they were wanting to talk to you during the day, but you have a day job and you just can't. And so I just decided, you know what, I need to go talk with somebody. And there was a guy that is friends with my parents, and he's a big finance. He's, in my opinion, he's a wizard with that kind of stuff. He's been really successful in life. And so I just said, hey, Don, uh, can I come up and ask you some questions about business?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, come on up. And so we met and we talked about it, and I said, so when do you know? And he's like, oh, Kevin, you just know. When you look at the finances and you see what is it going to take to keep going, well, you'll know when the time is. And I literally came back home, sat down, kind of just looked at the numbers, and I said, you know what, this is it, we're done.
Yeah.
And so pulled the plug, canceled all the subscriptions of the software that we were using and things like that. And it just got to that point where we were just done. And then, of course, you get back into the rhythm of, I've got this security of a paycheck, and and I love my job. I
Mm-hmm.
really do. But I've got to the point again, and here, this is kind of where we are currently. We got to the point again where I've got this itch, the entrepreneurial itch, that
Yeah.
I want, I got to scratch it, right? And so I've got two businesses that I'm right at the ground floor, getting ready to launch. Had really good conversation with a mentor just this week on Monday. I went up to talk to him about other things too, about my current job and opportunities there for his business and stuff like that. And then, but came away learning a bunch of stuff that I could do to help my business grow here. And that's been really incredible. And one of the things is talking about the numbers, looking at the numbers and deciding when certain things are going to happen, right? When are you going to go in and make it so that you're speeding the things up to make more profit? Are you raising prices? When do you raise prices? And, when to see the vision. And, and, and those were all big things for me to take away.
Mm-hmm.
The
So
vision.
kind of like a roadmap or like benchmarks that you can shoot for, and it
Yep.
also could be something to gauge like, okay, is this working? Is this successful? Am I able to hit these marks?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that was part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is you got to kind of lay out the numbers, and then you start backing into it. And then you say, okay, so for the first so many customers, we're going to charge this much. And then, but once we get to that customer number, and it's like, once we get to 10, that's when we're going to raise the price. And if you don't determine that beforehand, he says, it's so hard to just be like, we'll wait a little bit longer.
Mm,
But he's like, no, no, you set the benchmark. You say it's 10 or 20 or whatever your number is going to be, whatever you decide, you put that number in place, and then you stick to it. And
yeah.
then you might say, and then 6 months down the road, we're raising it again. And then another 6 months down the road, we're raising it again. And he says, the example that he used that I really liked is you're on a bus and you're driving the bus. And there's
Mm-hmm.
so many seats on a bus that your customers can sit in. But if the value of your product or your offering that you're offering there is there, and they see value in it, by raising the price, it's just going to keep them on the bus. They have that value. If they don't think that the value is there, they're going to get off the bus, and guess what that does? It opens up another seat for somebody to come in on the bus
Mm-hmm.
and pay the price that you're asking for the value. They obviously see the
Yeah.
value. They're going to come on. And,
Yeah, and that is hard. That's a hard one. In fact, with my photography business, I gotten better equipment and improved my quality, and I raised my prices. But I've just kind of been slowly like with certain customers saying, "Hey, this is my new price," but I have some that I haven't done that with, and that's hard, to like make that call. But that's something that's pertinent or relevant, I guess. But it sounds like honestly, it's really cool to see like looking to mentors, and like this obviously can be applied to any plan financially, whether it's starting a business or like an investing plan. Like uh, decide ahead of time what's my goal and what are my benchmarks, what am I trying to accomplish, and
yeah.
sticking to it. So it's not just like on a whim, flip flopping around what you're doing. And that's so one thing I'm working on as well. But currently, you have these businesses that are kind of launching. Do you? Is the point that you could say what they are, the name?
So one of them is a scanning bureau. So where I'm going out and looking for clients that they may. So for instance, my big target is any business that maybe is going to be still working from home during COVID. Uh, and the thing about that, right, is that as a business, if everybody's working from home, well, you've got all these files that are at the office. So every now and again, somebody's still having to drive into the office to access the files. And so, to me, if I can help any business go in, capture and digitize those documents, put them into an environment like a Microsoft SharePoint or something like that, to then be able to give access to all their employees to be able to access those files. Now all of a sudden you can keep people working from home and creating, a better culture. Maybe, obviously not everybody works great at home, but the fact is that if you give them the tools at their fingertips, then they can be more successful at their job, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for me, that's a big aspect of it. So, I go in and I grab boxes of documents and I bring them in and scan everything. I've got a nice big scanner that sits right here on my off to my shoulder here, and I just go in and I convert everything to digital formats, index everything and things like that, and then I deliver it back via SharePoint. And then if they want the documents back, then we give them the documents back or we shred them. Whatever their decision is. So
But
that's
this is
one of
all
them.
just more pivoting, right? You have these skill
Yes.
sets, this knowledge, you see the need because you understand document management and the needs, and you can use that, your skills, and pivot and say, this isn't completely different from what you've done, but you've kind of built and kind
It,
of
it's just
pivoted and moved.
an add-on, right? If you really
Mhm.
look, I still work for File Center.
Yeah.
Is the company I work for now, and they have an amazing software that helps people do this. But then you get people again; they get in their own way, and they don't get everything digitized, and they don't have everything organized the way that they need to get it organized, or something like that. And so that's what File Center will focus on. But then, we have lots of times where customers call up and say, "Well, hey, do you know anybody that scans those documents? Could come in and scan for us?" And I just kept saying no. And then it just happened to be that I was working with one of the clients that needed some training, and I just said, "Hey, you know what? What like what if I scan those documents for you?" And he's like, "Do you do that?" And I was like, "Well, I've done it before," and I just said, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's have a conversation at least." And so I drove up to
Yeah.
Salt Lake on one of the days there. I took a day off of work and drove up there and had a conversation with them, and it was something that was really interesting to me. I had tried starting a scanning bureau before, and for years now, like for the last, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years. My friend Derek Turner would probably attest to this, that I've been talking about it for a long time, but just never executed. And then just that one day, like I was just sitting there, and it was just that start. It was that pivot moment, right? It was like,
Hmm.
you know what? Let's stop getting in the way of yourself, and let's go look at what we can do. And if it pans out, great. If it doesn't, then oh well. So that's just another thing that we maybe had failed on but learned from. If you look at the most successful person, we always look at them at they're at this top of this mountain, right? And
Hmm.
we look at them and we're like, oh man, they're so successful. I wish I could be like them. And you don't see any of the things that they failed at or anything. But if you really think about it, that mountain that they're on, it's a mountain of failures,
Yeah.
and they just kept climbing. They learned
Yes.
they learned from what they failed at, and then they just kept climbing, and now they're at the top.
Exactly.
They're at the top.
Yes. And that
We think it
that
was
brings
all
to my
easy
mind too.
for them, right? We think it was all easy for them, but really, it was
Yes.
really tough work, and they just didn't come overnight.
Yes.
So
And that's what I thought earlier when you're talking is like we always hear the success stories of like the business and how it just like I kept grinding and it's just boom boom boom. But yeah, but what about all the things leading up to that? And sometimes you do hear those stories because they are interesting. But you're right, it's a mountain of learning and failures, and every failure is better than having not tried because of the things you learn. Like it's so valuable.
well,
I think it's oh,
you have a
go ahead.
choice. It's
Yeah.
you always have a choice. You can choose to shrink back away,
Hmm.
or you can choose to move forward. And
Exactly.
there's a book by a guy named David Williams. He had been the CEO of a company called Fishbowl Inventory, and he wrote this book, and it's called Failing Forward, I think is what he said is the name of the book. And I just kept thinking about that, like, oh yeah, you can fail and you can shrink back and retreat,
Hmm.
or you can say, okay, what was the mistake here? What did I learn? And then move.
Hmm. Yeah. It's a skill. Man, Kevin, it's your story is really interesting, and I just appreciate so much you sharing it. And I think that's the real takeaway here is, I mean, my original thought was like, hey, man, I know you've pivoted a lot, but it's also like a story about getting started. Pulling the trigger and taking that first step. And I almost feel like that's the name of this episode is probably taking the first step
Right.
with Kevin Anderson. So, and I just appreciate so much your time, dude, and your expertise and your story. Um, so what's the name of your company, man? Just so people can find you.
So the name of the company is Rocky Mountain Scanning. You can find it by going to rmscanning.com. Don't judge the website yet, because again, I didn't I didn't know where to go yet, and so I just kind of threw something out. I had to get something out. I wasn't going to let it stop me. And right now we're in the development of a new website. So
Yeah,
don't
but
beat
it's
me up.
live. Someone could
Don't,
find you
don't
and
beat me
listen
up
to
on
you.
it. But it's live. I started, and that's the key factor.
Yes, you started.
So, yep.
It's exactly right. You build upon that, and maybe the website isn't where you want it to be, but I know that your process is there for scanning, and you can do it, and you do a great job, and you're getting more clients because of that. So good for you, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again. So if anybody has any questions, either for Kevin that I can pass along, get his answer, for me, topic ideas, you can email me at nobettertime.podcast@gmail.com. But also now you can reach me at contact nobettertimepodcast.com. Either one will work. And I'd love to hear from you. But please rate and review the podcast on Apple. That really helps people find the podcast. And just, if nothing else, please listen because I love that. That really helps too. Thanks so much, Kevin, again.
I
And
appreciate
today, you guys, just take that first step. If you're thinking about something, whether it be learning a new skill, starting a business, uh, preparing for retirement, saving, anything, take that first step. Even if it's $10 a month you put towards something, do a something. Like I say, something is always better than nothing. All right, man. You guys have a great day. And thanks, Kevin. Have a good one.
it. But
Bye.